Hey everybody, American Thought Project here, Nick Olivenzi and Robert Barbosa. For our next episode, or before we get into our next episode, kind of just wanted to take a quick second to remind our viewers that um, one of the main points of us doing this show is to make sure that this is a call for unity, a healthy public debate on political issues in this country and the future of our country. And we just, although obviously by now you probably figured out that Robert and I are right of center when it comes to our political beliefs in one way, shape, or another, but this is all meant to be a message of unity for our country. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there before we get going. Robert, do you want to add anything to that before we get into
Yeah,
this?
yeah. I mean, the fundamental goal of American Thought Project is to have intelligent debate on things and unify behind what it means to truly be an American and what these American values are, and provide a platform that helps educate us on what those are, have the discussions around those things, and ultimately, I think for me personally, is how do we live up to our nation's creed? It's the most amazing country the world has ever known. We were the only country founded and rooted on fundamental idea. And yeah, I mean, I think we can all unify around that. And if we can't, well, then, it might
What's the
just
point
be,
of this, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think great points. Unity is paramount in terms of what the American Foundation is rooted and based on. So above all else, we just want to have intelligent debate around these issues and give the facts as they are. Let folks make their decisions on if they do believe or don't believe some of the things we conclude, and yeah, just go from there.
Sounds good. So anyway, to start, so what are we talking about today? What's on the topics today?
I think what's jumping out off the screen to everyone right now is this call for disarming, defunding, dismantling, or dissolving the police.
Mm-hmm.
We are officially to a point where folks are not asking for reform, improvement, optimization, equal opportunity, and justice under the law, which is enforced by the police, but the straight up dissolving of the police, which on the face of it is absolutely absurd.
I don't think there's any other way to say that.
Yeah, I can't come to a rational conclusion as to why. So to me, the first question we need to ask when you hear a loud minority start clamoring for not just defunding and pulling money away or dismantling and rebuilding, but just dissolving and move to, quote, alternative forms of community policing and security, whatever that means. It sounds like the mob to me. The first question should be, well, why? Is there a reason that we need to dissolve the police force largely across America that is rooted in facts and statistics and truth that is categorically true, not anecdotal evidence, but a categorical problem that stretches, it's far reaching in how wide it stretches across the entire nation. So the short answer to that is no, there's not a reason for that, right?
Yeah. Well, let's like take emotion out of it, and I think you've got some stats to look at, right?
Yeah, I think we'll put these links in the description, but if you just go and look at the FBI website, look at total homicides, you can break them down by race if you want, or if you just want to look at it from a total standpoint, you're looking at anywhere, depending on how you slice.
So when you say homicide, you mean police shootings? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, police. So
police homicides. Yeah, that's still a homicide.
Police shooting individuals. So death by the police shooting American citizens, and then I took that data and compared it to total homicides. Total homicides. In the U.S. in 2017 was about 15,000. And total individuals killed by the police was about a little over 1,000. So you're talking around 6% of the total homicides in America that happened were caused by the police. Now, this doesn't take into account just or warranted, right?
Right. This is just police deaths in general, whether they were
Right,
justified
exactly.
or not.
So if you pull out, what we would say wrongful deaths, unarmed deaths, which doesn't necessarily mean wrongful either, right?
No, if
But
I go
let's
assault a police officer with no gun in my hand and the police officer shoots and kills me, I was unarmed.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, if you take the total homicides, this is going to be a directional statistic. In 2018, 14,000 total homicides. And there were, what we know of in 2019, there were 28 unarmed, call it, let's just put a cushion in there, 35 total unarmed Americans killed by the police. All you have to do, divide that number by the total people killed, and you get your percentage, not even a full point.
Yeah.
0.03. So
even if every single one of those was unjustified, right? A police officer who did the wrong thing in the eyes of the law, that's not even making a blip.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, it's like, so that's 0.2. Sorry, I misspoke. 0.2. So that what's the warranted? That we go into a whole different argument. But just for the sake of this point, if every single unarmed individual who was murdered by the police, it was not justified, you're talking about 0.2%. The police save thousands upon thousands of lives by enforcing traffic laws, by preventing crime to begin with, by stopping aggravated assault or strong arm robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, breaking up conspiracy to commit murder, all of these things, right? Now, that does not take us away from the point that any wrongful death is tragic. Of course. And we believe that we should continually reform, improve, optimize, and root out issues in the police force. And we can do that in a number of ways. So this isn't to say, oh, well, just, tough luck, a few people are going to die. No, that's not the case. But when you're calling for ending the entity that protects a huge portion of our civil liberties, and in some cases saves our lives on a daily basis, you better have compelling data to tell me that we need to take that apart.
Yeah, so a couple things here. So first of all, I've heard, and first of all, those crime stats, what they don't include there are all the crimes that were not committed because there is a police force.
Yep.
Right. So the whole idea of deterrence is it's hard to quantify that. So we can't really assess that. But on another note, we see this a lot of times when we evaluate the effectiveness in the justice system, and when it comes to like locking away innocent people. And in this context, unjustified police killings. And, I've heard several times recently that, one unjustified death is too many and is unacceptable. Well, let me lay some cold hard truth on you here, guys. Unfortunately, we as a society have to make accommodations for certain errors because we have two choices. For example, in the justice system, we can either admit and acknowledge that we will lock up innocent people. It's going to happen. That's just going to be a natural consequence every once in a while, unfortunately. But the alternative is to have no justice system at all. And yes, we should absolutely always be striving to improve it so that we continue to lessen the number of people that are convicted of crimes they did not commit. But we should not just completely get rid of our courts and our justice system. This is the same exact thing. We are giving police officers the trust and the authority to do what they need to do to stop crime. And there's going to be mistakes that happen. They are human beings, just like everybody else. It's going to happen, and it is a tragedy. And we should be doing everything that we can to reduce those numbers as close to zero as possible, with the understanding that we will probably never get to zero, just because there is a huge human element there. So that's just something to think about whenever we consider, getting rid of something because there's some evil that's being done.
Yeah, I mean, that perfectly captures the point of we're a flawed people. The human race is a flawed race. I keep on going back to this Madison statement about if angels were men, there'd be no need for government. And if angels govern men, there'd be no need to restrain it. There will always be tension between institutions that help promote and further society and individuals acting on their own or of their own volition, right? There's always going to be tension because we're flawed. So, I mean, to me, that's a very good point. We are never going to get to a place where no bad things happen, where there's no tragedy. That is a utopian pipe dream that does not exist at this side of heaven. It is unrealistic. I understand that there are emotions at play anytime someone loses a life, and categorically speaking, anytime, like whether it be, should we reduce the speed limit? Should we not allow XYZ in our diet? Should we not allow big gulps in New York? What is it? Like, I understand there's emotions behind it. But at the end of the day, you're not going to eradicate that. And just, I keep on going back to the data. The data points are not there at all. Even, I mean, I know it's easy to cast this thing out and say, oh, dissolve the police. You're a crazy person, right? But I think it's our responsibility to listen to people who have concerns, who bring up objections, and let us prove they're crazy through intellectual debate, through statistics, through information and discussion. Let's provide a logical basis for that idea being crazy. I think we'll do that today with dissolving the police, right?
Yeah.
So I guess with that, I think if anyone, by the way, if you think there are justified reasons to dissolve the police, please comment below. Let us know why. I want to see what data you're looking at that justifies that, because I don't see it.
So I also want to add something on like scrutiny, right? Like when we as a society decide to scrutinize a certain thing. So I got a stat here. 2015, there were like about 900 police shooting deaths. And remember, that includes justified and unjustified. It's all of them. That same year, there were somewhat around 250,000 deaths that were caused by medical errors in the hospital. So why are we not all up in arms scrutinizing doctors, the curriculum that they're learning in medical school, the training that nurses get? How come we're not just going ballistic over that, yet we choose to scrutinize something else? I'm just throwing it out, a comparative stat that we just want to think about, why is it that we're choosing to scrutinize certain things over others?
Yeah.
Do you have a theory there?
I think that's a very valid point. I'd say the one, like my pushback on it would be, okay, well, one is with malicious intent and one's a mistake. I think that's the argument against it that you'll continue to get
I mean, there's a lot of police shootings that are unjustified, right? But at the time, the police officer was scared to death, pulled his gun and fired. It definitely did not have like murderous intent. But it does not mean the shooting death was justified. And a lot of them, sometimes they ultimately go down for that. So the idea
that's a great point.
Yeah, and the idea that an unjustified shooting indicates murderous intent is also not accurate. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It definitely does. There's definitely got to be times in a country of 330 million and tens of thousands of arrests a year that there are situations where the officer is out to get someone and that happens. But we cannot put that categorically on every single unjustified shooting as well.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. Thomas Sowell came out with a comment today. I'll just read it real quick. He said, there should be a special contempt for those who sit in safety and comfort, second guessing at their leisure, the split-second decisions that policemen have to make at the risk of their own lives. So, I mean, I think that speaks to exactly what you're saying, right? Doesn't justify. None of these things that we're talking about justifies killing,
wrongful death,
or anything, any injustice committed by the police. We're not justifying that. But to say that because some injustices happen, we should get rid of the very apparatus that helps uphold justice seems completely asinine to me.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'll open this to a question for you, I think we also want to see reform, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there needs to be. We lock up way too many people, in my opinion. I do think use of force is used too often. And I think, we were chatting earlier, there is a true qualitative measure that shows the effectiveness of a police force in a specific community, and that is the trust the community has in the police force. Where I live, the trust for the police force is very, very high. The sheriff of the police department is well respected, is rooted in the community. The trust is high, right? And we can rack and stack that against Minneapolis, so to speak. There are very clear examples, not just recently, of a problem with that police force. So yes, there should be reform. In Ferguson, DOJ report came out after that whole ordeal. They really dug deep, and turns out police were policing for profit. They were leveraging the bail system and traffic light cameras and traffic stops.
Oh, don't get me started on that, dude. I've got more speeding tickets than I'd like to.
Right.
But let me add something here on training. So, as you know, I was Marine Corps infantry, right? Deployed to Afghanistan once. So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who did way more deployments than I did and saw a lot of combat. And he was also at one point Marine Corps Special Operations, and he was watching a lot of videos of all the incidents that have been happening in the wake of the tragic incident with George Floyd. And as a trained, combat infantryman, he was saying a whole bunch of this when it comes to police improperly utilizing tear gas, beanbag shotguns, other non-lethal weapons and tactics. He was saying a huge portion of this is an absolute lack of and failure of training. Training. These officers are just not properly trained on escalation of force tactics, when you need to be doing something, how to properly administer non-lethal stuff. Like no one should ever get shot in the face with a beanbag. Sorry, that's just if you do that, that was just you weren't close enough, and B, you have not properly been trained on how to utilize these types of things that we give police officers leeway to do to quell, in this case, rioting. So when it comes to reforms, absolutely, they need a whole lot more training on not only the law and what the law is and where their powers end and what they should and should not be doing, but also tactical training on de-escalation measures and how to properly use lethal and non-lethal weapons in situations of stress. So if that is something that we acknowledge, defunding the police is the exact opposite of what we need to do. They need more expensive training and funding to make sure that we, again, start to, I guess, forgive me for the cliche, flatten that curve, right?
Yeah.
Approach as close to zero as we can.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Training, whether it be from a military perspective that you have experience in, as a just American citizen that has the Second Amendment rights, I train often. That is so eye-opening when you start training for anything, actually, at the beginning, and you see how inept you are. But when you were talking, I just thought about, I played baseball all the way through college. How much training went into that? How many reps I took off the tee? How many ground balls I took? All of these things. That was for a game. So if that's the level of training people are taking for a game, what should the training be like when you are talking use of force and de-escalation and prevention of crime? Now, I must admit, I don't know the day-to-day training that police officers do, but I can't help but think if they're on the beat 24/7, what extracurricular training are they doing? Is there something to be said for an increased number of police so they can have less days of on-duty work combined with more days of actual training.
Which again means larger forces and more funding.
Exactly. And you know what, while we're on the funding piece, dissolving of police unions and certain immunity protections and placing responsibility back on the policemen and the police unit is always a good thing. If you're going to increase funding of something and the community says, yes, let's go for that, we vote to support that.
And you should also increase scrutiny. Yeah,
scrutiny, transparency, which will improve scrutiny, which will improve accountability, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's if we're going to talk tangible solutions, there's one, right?
Yeah.
But there's a couple, actually. The immunity laws, the training, and the police union apparatus that apparently creates a lot of roadblocks for accountability. So to kind of wrap this small portion up, unless you have something else to add, the why behind should we defund, dismantle, or dissolve, there is no justifiable reason to even entertain that type of argument, right? But there is a very good discussion and many data points that suggest we should be ferociously looking at reforming and improving the police force, which I would include a proper incentive structure. You're going to ask me to risk my life every day. I might be a good-hearted American that wants to serve my community and uphold justice, and it's my passion. But to negate the economic incentive factor is folly.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, do you have anything to add on those 2 points?
No, I think that's good.
All right. So with that, let's transition to, hey, this isn't just pie in the sky. Nick and Robert aren't just, oh, no one's really saying that, defund the police. That's nonsense. It's just a couple people. No, it is not.
Yeah.
So let's transition to who both politicians and activists are saying these, and what are they saying? Yeah. You got Brian Fallon, Hillary Clinton's press secretary, tweets, defund police. Ilhan Omar, a congresswoman from Minnesota, defund the police. Rashida Tlaib, congresswoman, defund the police, dismantle. AOC wants it completely gone, congresswoman from New York. City council members in Minneapolis have already created a quote-unquote veto-proof majority to dismantle the Minneapolis police. The comptroller in New York City wants to slash the NYPD's budget by $1 billion. Has anyone gone to New York City and seen it is a war zone? It looks like a war zone in certain areas. I mean, people are fleeing there. Here's an interesting one. Jeremiah Ellison, the son of, what's his dad's name? Keith Ellison, who's the Attorney General of Minnesota, wants to not only dismantle the police, but get behind supporting Antifa as a means to that end.
Wow.
And Eric Garcetti in LA, Los Angeles Police Department, they want to slash funding by $150 million. These are not just nobodies. These are real politicians. I won't get into what, the stupid signs you see and all this mumbo jumbo on Twitter and whatnot, but there is a real voice pushing this agenda to defund, dismantle, and dissolve the police. I mean, the fact that these people are prominent politicians, this is a problem, at least for 98% of Americans, I say, want a police force that is continually improving. Again, we want to improve. We want to reform. We want to get yahoos the hell off of the police force and hold them accountable and have them serve out the justice that's due to them.
So let's talk about like the impacts of this. So let's say that we do decide to just defund the police. What does this world actually look like? And surprise, surprise, like a lot of this type of stuff goes, who pays the price? The most vulnerable people in society with the least amount of economic resources are the ones that will suffer for this. Because the rich people in gated communities, they will all get private security. they're not going to be bothered at all. All the politicians, everybody in the ivory towers, they're all going to have their same private security firms that are protecting them. But you know who's going to pay for this? Your rape victims, your domestic violence, right? Who do you think the woman who's being beaten by her husband, who do you think she's going to call? All of these environments where we have people that we know are suffering, that is where you need more policing. Where that's who they are going to be able to call. And so if we just get rid of police, we're going to have a huge uptick in violence. And anyone who doesn't think that is just absolutely delusional. That's just not a real world.
I mean, if you want a small, sample size, look at Southside Chicago, 18 murders in 24 hours. Over Memorial Day weekend, there was some 50 people shot. I mean, it's really a shame that there's not more spotlight on that, because those, not just the mayor, but I mean, the police chief, the city council members, the state senators, the state assembly people. Are you kidding me? Your city is a freaking joke, and people's civil liberties are being slashed and destroyed on a daily basis. So this is the result, right? The police force, it's been in our existence since we were a country. Its primary end is just that of a government that's instituted to secure and protect individual rights. Our civil liberties, right? Our right to life, they're protected on a daily basis. Our right to property, they protect it on a daily basis. Our right to freely travel and assemble peacefully, they protect, right? That's their just and moral mission.
Yeah.
Look at the economically oppressed, advantaged, maybe health advantaged person in Southside Chicago. How many
disadvantaged, right? Economically disadvantaged.
Yeah. How many civil liberties do they have obstacles in exercising? Do they feel comfortable traveling freely? Now, we don't have a right to ultimate security, right? But we do institute a government so that we can exercise our rights to a further extent. And you see in these areas where you can't go out past a certain time, or you can't go down certain streets, or you can't shop at certain places, those are the suppression of being able to exercise your civil rights. And it's due to bad policing, lack of policing, no accountability. So I say, go spend a couple months in Southside Chicago where you can't get a gun legally, and tell me how that goes.
Yeah, and you think it's just gangbangers killing gangbangers? It's not. The innocent always die with the rest. It is women and children that are just in their kitchen cooking, and a drive-by comes through and they catch a stray round. It happens all the time.
Wrong
it is
place,
absolutely
wrong time.
Tragic. And you think that getting rid of police is the answer? Like, it's just, we have a responsibility to protect the most vulnerable in our society from that level of violence that is just, in most cases, we just can't imagine those things happening in America. That's something that you see in Afghanistan. Just straight barbarism every day. And the fact that we think that this is the answer. I mean, my kind of analogy here is, we're seeing these getting rid of police is like, all right, looking at potholes, okay? So potholes in the road are bad. They cause accidents. Accidents kill people, and that's terrible. So the answer to getting rid of potholes is just going to be to get rid of all the roads.
Yeah.
But we get rid of roads, we will definitely get rid of all the potholes. I promise you there will be no more potholes. But we've mentioned before, we've got to think about first, second, and third, and fourth order effects to the decisions that we make. And if you get rid of roads, it's going to cause a whole lot of other problems. It's going to be pretty tough to get between A and B and to, just live your normal life. And that is quite clearly not the answer. We need to make sure that whenever we solve problems in society, and especially those that are so emotional and polarizing as this issue is, we got to think rationally, make sure that we're not taking one step forward and 3 steps back.
Right.
And make sure that that our actions are not causing more harm than good.
Yeah.
And it certainly seems to me like the idea of defunding, dismantling, diminishing, and limiting our police's ability to keep us safe will most certainly have negative consequences that are greater than the good that they cause.
Right.
Net liability to society.
Yeah, for sure. You know, one of the things that I saw on CNN with this Lisa Bender, that one of the city council people that's pushing for the dismantling of the Minneapolis police, you know, she gets asked by, what's Camerata's first name? I forget her name. Ask her, well, what are people going to do when they need to call, you know, their house is getting broken into in the middle of the night, or their house is on fire? Who do they call? And this lady, who is pushing to abolish the police in a city right now that looks like a war zone. If you just Google videos of downtown Minneapolis right now, I mean, if you correct me if I'm wrong, you've been to Afghanistan, and tell me, you know, how comparable it is. Says, oh, well, you know, I understand that. And that comes from being able to call the police in the middle of the night, comes from a place of privilege. I'm like, yeah, yes, privilege of living in a civil society and the greatest nation in the country, yes. But the ironic thing is, it's the folks that are born into less or no privilege that are most adversely affected. Yeah. So pick one. Are you saying that you need to disband the police because folks with no privilege are getting adversely, you know, the adverse effects of policing? Or are you saying that the people who need to call the police the most, which are this same group of people, have privilege? Which one is it? You can't logically argue both. So I'm just like, this is the level of argument that's coming out for the reason to disband the police. And, you know, in one fundamental sense, this lady is right. Not that she knows this is the truth in what she's saying. We are very privileged to live in America, to have a police force that protects our civil liberties on a daily basis and risk their lives to do so. From that,
it doesn't fleece you for money every time they come up to you.
Yeah, I think there's a real level of ignorance in the just general population of what other countries look like, what other, you know, semi-civil societies look like. I mean, you know, we're half Puerto Rican. Go down to Puerto Rico, it's a completely different story. It really is. I've been there a number of times. It's very different. That's a U.S. territory, right? You know, we could probably make the same argument for some areas of New York City or Chicago or Detroit. But, you know, you take it to the extreme. You've been to Afghanistan. I have some of my other Marine buddies who've been all over the Middle East. Like, I say that because there's that level of ignorance of understanding the true blessing of living in America with its problems is almost incomparable to some of these other places, you know?
Yeah. And the answer is just not lawlessness. And that is what will result if you do this. And so I just think, to kind of wrap up, we all have to, you know, don't get me wrong, this is extremely emotional and one of the most politically charged time in my lifetime thus far. But we have to think clearly and come up with realistic goals that will solve the problems that we have. And, you know, we've talked about this before. We cannot make knee-jerk decisions in times of duress, stress, and emotion. Right. And make no mistake, you know, some bad police incidents and then just get rid of all of them. That is the strict definition of a knee-jerk reaction. Yeah. And we cannot do that as a society. But at the same time, we also cannot do nothing. Something has to be done. But go ahead.
I mean, we have got to do something, not just because there's clear data that suggests we do need to, But
Yeah.
we do need to reform, whether it be the number of folks that die in police custody in America compared to other Western civilizations, whatever. There's some data that really does suggest that. But also, I go back to this qualitative measure of if there are fellow Americans that do not have trust in the system that's supposed to protect them, that needs to be listened to. And we need to assume validity to that, because that is that person's reality, regardless of anything else. So it is our responsibility to listen and to take up those actions that need to be made, because trust in the system that's supposed to be protecting your civil liberties is imperative. It will completely corrode and eventually implode if you do not address these valid concerns. So I just, there's both. There's the quantitative, yes, look at all these things, but I think there's even more of a American strain value, if you will, of listening to our fellow Americans who bring up valid concerns and show a lack of trust, a lack of justice being executed. And that should fire everybody up to want to improve things. And I think complacency and money that is tied to unions and politicians, et cetera, has dampened down or covered up a lot of these problems for a while, and it's led us to an unfortunate place.
Completely agree. Completely agree. All right. Anything else you want to add here?
Like, subscribe, comment below. Let us know your opinions. Let us know what you think about defunding, dismantling, or dissolving the police. If there's some justification for it, help educate us. Help us understand that point. And until then, God bless and be well.
Thanks, guys. American Thought Project. Until next time. See ya.